Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you hail in the world. This is Audrey Lloyd and Dr. Sandi Webster for another edition of Primer Chats. So today we thought we would talk about my favorite subject, change. So Sandi, before I get going too far, do you have anything to say in terms of priming everyone for what Primer Chats is all about? I forgot to introduce that.
Primer chats is just getting you to start a conversation, getting you ready to think about whatever topic you're going to talk about. So, for example, today we're talking about change. How do you start talking to someone about it? What are some of the things you need to think about when you're going through the process of change? So that's what we're doing today.
And if I could, Sandi, sort of pull back the curtain a little bit, I want to say this because you and I think, are great in conversing together, and hopefully what we're putting out in the world is helpful. But on the topic of change, I want most people to also know that to be change is to be agile and flexible in the moment, meaning that at this point in our lives, I feel like we have evolved and come to a place where we know many things about many different topics. We've had great experiences. We have our own observations. That means that you can step out and share that without a teleprompter, without having to read your notes, without having to second guess yourself. Now, yes, we do want to make sure that it's grounded in content that's going to be helpful, that's researched and truthful, but we also should feel as if in the ability to change, and I think you've said this very well, you can actually change in the moment, meaning that you can also have thoughts and ideas that come to you in the moment too. That's another part of change.
Yeah, and we have to be in the mindset, right? We talked about the mindset that we must be in. If we want to change, we have to be ready and mentally prepared to make that change. And I said, I change every day. Every single day that I wake up, it's a different world. It's literally a different world. It's not the same as it was yesterday, and you can't get it back. So whatever is happening today, you have to learn to deal with it. Clients are going to call me with things that I don't expect. That's a change. And I have to learn and know how to deal with that when a client calls me. It could be an unpleasant change, right? Change isn't always good. For some people, they like it, things the way they are. They will stay the way they are for the rest of their lives instead of learning. And, let's go back to the pandemic. Let's talk about the pandemic. How were some of the ways you thought you changed during the pandemic?
Well, thank you for the question, but I would say that the pandemic actually did not surprise me. And when I say that, that's because why? You track, right? You sort of saw some of the things that were going on. You read the literature. So I was obviously not on the front line to say that a pandemic is coming, but we knew eventually that there was something coming. The next pandemic was on the rise. It was about time. It was due, right? So in terms of preparation for agility wise, I was one of those people that was on the forefront. The whole companies that I worked with, it's really important to be flexible. And here's something that's interesting. Before the pandemic was announced, I had taken everything, I swear to you, from the client where I worked. I brought everything home. So when they announced, I believe it was on that Wednesday, oh, we're not going to go back to the office. I already knew we weren't going to go back to the office, and I had my things. So fast forward, when it was time for them to go and physically take their things, they forgot that I took a lot of my stuff home because maybe they didn't even see me doing it. And they were like, oh, what day are you coming in to get your stuff? There was nothing. The only thing I had there was some silver flatware that I had gotten from Starbucks, a fork, a knife, a spoon, and a napkin. I was like, that's okay. They can throw that away. I was good. So that's one aspect. But in terms of my personal life, yeah, I love change. I love change from the standpoint, like you said, because you feel like you're alive and you go with it. I can't control anything. I'm not the orchestrator of this world. I'm the orchestrator of my life, but I don't own what happens. So I have to be ready for what happens. So when the pandemic came and I realized you can't go anywhere, you have to be under lockdown, it was time for that. And when it was time to start exiting that was a process. And I actually saw change in motion because I was one of the ones that wore my mask for a very long time. And I had to say to myself, it's time to remove the mask. And even right now, today, in May 2023, I have to say to myself, nothing is going to happen on my computer. Nothing's going to happen in my head. Nothing's going to happen in my house. I have to get out into the real world and be with people. That's where real things happen. So that's my answer to that question. And thank you for that, Sandi.
For me, the pandemic I was already prepared, right? And this is part of the preparation, is forward thinking, future thinking. What is going to be necessary? Work from home. Let's take work from home, because I went out and got a degree in flexible work arrangement before any pandemic or any thought of this. And the reason I got that was because I've been doing flexible work arrangement since 1993.
Yes, at American Express. You and I both worked there. So absolutely.
1993. And I was one of the first people to get, a computer that you could take out and take home. And from dial-up, AOL dial-up days, I was working from home and working part-time. So I had a very flexible work schedule. And I got that because I wanted to go back to school. And some of the classes were on weekdays. So that allowed me to work from home and then go to school seamlessly. We started flex days. Actually, Amex started flex days, right? Where you got Fridays off. But when I started my company after Amex, Peggy and I started it completely on a virtual model. We did have an office, but we only went into the office for meetings, team meetings. The HR people used it to do interviews, in-person interviews that weren't done online. It was a small office. It was inexpensive in Newark. We didn't feel the need to have like a big Fifth Avenue office. And we used to say that to a lot of our cohorts. Why do you have this big office? This big overhead, really? That's what your office is. You have all these people traveling 2 hours or more per day to get in there when they could have been productive. Your business doesn't have clients coming into your office. Like, why do you have this office? And before the pandemic, the answer we got were, we've got to have this address. Like, you're nothing if you don't have this Fifth Avenue address, right? Or if we're not in the financial district, because we work with financial people. I'm like, but you don't go to their offices, you do everything online. And so when the pandemic happened, and it forced all those unprepared people who still had what real estate values went down like astronomically, they had to leave, not even voluntarily. Buildings shut down, right? So if you didn't have a setup at home, you were totally screwed. Yes. And I know I helped churches. I helped hundreds of churches start from home, because churches didn't do cameras and Zoom and all of that stuff, which was commonplace for me, right? So we had to give them the solutions. We gave it all for free. We helped churches get back online. We helped small business owners, like your local laundry cleaners. Those, they're not online.
That's great, Sandi. And I have to say, you're hitting on something that's really interesting, because you and I both have the great experience from American Express. But most people don't know, or maybe they do, depending on their age, that American Express was in very close proximity to the World Trade Center. And so when that disaster happened, that unfortunate disaster happened, we were impacted and we could not go back to the address. Correct. And the people that were in Jersey City also were displaced. We were all over the tri-state area. So we got an early window into what it was like to feel displaced and to understand what productivity is from home. And I'm coming to the point that we're on the subject of change, that I think that many times there are precursors that happen in our lives to change, to get us ready for big change if we are aware. And so you and I had the gift of, even though it was an unfortunate situation, we had an early window, as I said, into what it would take, right, to be able to stand up a business that was sound like it was hybrid virtual. And for me, when I spoke of the fact, like early days when you would say to people hoteling or virtual or social distancing, they had no idea what you were talking about. But
No,
when I had that prior experience, it was sort of, I could write the manual on working from home, which I did for the hospital that I worked for, because I already had that experience dated back to, 2001 when we had to do that.
right.
So, we should be watchful of when change happens. We're talking about primer. It's also a primer for the next time. What can we learn? What
Have
can
to
we take
learn.
with
You
us?
have to learn from it.
Correct.
And I think there's some people who are still so far behind right now because they did not learn from this pandemic.
I love that. And you know what? It's so funny. I didn't pull the thread through when I said what I said, but you're right. The question becomes for everyone who's listening, what did you learn from the pandemic? What?
I
That's
mean,
the
friendships changed, family relationships changed. You couldn't go see your grandmother. You couldn't hug your grandmother or older people, right? There was no hugging. During the pandemic, fist bumps became popular. When Obama did the fist bump, it was a big deal. All of a sudden, everybody's fist bumping and elbowing and what you did,
Blade. Right.
you didn't touch people, right? And so that common thing of touching or meeting someone for lunch, even if you're not touching them, you would meet somebody for lunch and it got you out the house, right? I work from home, so that got me out the house. I could see people. In-person events stopped. I belong to numerous organizations that they had in-person events. They'd bring a speaker in. Yeah, Sandy gets out the house to go mingle with people and have these in-person. It stopped. And so everything switched online. You had to up your Zoom game. But that is just one way that we had to change, right? That pulled it to the forefront in a bigger way and faster. Like we didn't have time to think about it. We had to go change tomorrow.
Yeah, but the lesson from that, and I alluded to it earlier when I said you can jump on Zoom and what do we want to talk about today? Draw from our experience, and you can get online and literally be ready when 5 minutes before, maybe you were running around with your sick child. Because I think the pandemic taught me that you can be faster, quicker, get ready, sit in your seat, and you're there. But on the tail end of that, what it also taught me, which I alluded to earlier, is that I can do all the pre-work and I can do me here by myself in my office, but I actually do need to get out into the real world. And sometimes you're right, it's not physical, but it means inviting other people in to your space. Because I also noticed that I missed people. I love being with people, observing people, and more the energy that people give off. You can feel it. It's palatable.
There's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it.
And we tried to imitate that on Zoom, and it doesn't quite work. I mean, we had dinner parties on Zoom. We had, I did speak to way more family and actually saw them on Zoom than I do in person because I'd have to fly to England, I'd have to fly to Florida. And now we got together. We had like little family reunions, right? Where you caught up, I got to see babies and that I never would have seen. And so there are negatives and positives in change. But if you're not open to that, then you're going to be left behind. And I think even today, after the pandemic, there's some people like we were talking about it, they retired. They couldn't deal with this. They retired.
That blows me away. And I have seen it for myself that viable, smart, capable people that don't want to adjust to a new system. And, God bless them if they can do that financially. And if that's really what they want to do, thumbs up, right? But if you're just leaving a company because you just don't want to learn a new technology, as my dad has taught me, there's always going to be something new. It's not this, something else. It might not be learning a new, time logging system, attendance system. It might be something else, but you're going to have to do something else that's new.
I remember, and this again, good old American Express. I remember the first layoff that American Express had. They hadn't had a layoff, I don't think, ever. And there was this one man, I won't say his name, but he was an older gentleman, and he had kids going into college. We were much younger. We weren't even thinking about what is a child. We had no concept of what a child was. But he had children going into college. But the work that he did was very manual, and we had brought in computers. This is how old I am. We actually brought computers into American Express, my department, and he wouldn't learn how to use the computer. Here comes layoff time. And we all knew, like, the people without the skill sets are going to be the first to go. And our hearts ached, because this is a man, he was there, I think he was at the company like 30 years at that point, right? And now he's in the prime of his life, where his kids are going into college, and he's going to be without a job. And I have to say that I never really thought about like putting money away for college. Like, we weren't in that mindset. We were very young. But when I saw that, that was such a drastic change for him, even just switching to learning little things on the computer, that he actually took the package of being laid off rather than learn the computer.
Yeah, and there are those people, and as you're talking, I have to think about, as we're winding down, what is the opportunity for change now for people living right now in 2023? And yes, we can talk about AI, and we can talk about blockchain, and we can go on and on. Here's what I think. I think the number one thing that people have to learn in order to evolve is mindset, because we say that this is an uncertain time. Every time in man's existence has always been uncertain. The unknown is uncertain.
Yep.
You don't know what's coming tomorrow. We can't change the world, but we can change ourselves. And I think we started this conversation by talking about being watchful. I think it also means that you have to know yourself, right? But scanning to know what's going on and sort of staying with it, going with it, and being in the moment. And I think all of that rolls up into a ready mindset, a mindset and learning.
You have to read. I read every day, whether I do a lot of my reading online. I actually have so many books, like physical books here, that now when I take the train, I take a book with me. So I could, because I don't have that much free time, and the train is kind of free time to do it. But every day I get the Wall Street Journal online. There's CNN that's daily, constantly bombarding me. So I don't even watch it until like at night. But you need to keep up with what's going on in the world.
You need to do that. And I love that you are a consumer, you know what I mean? Because I'm the same way. I love information, and I feel like you're relevant when you have the information. However, there's one more thing. You can consume, you can hear, you can have all the best sources, but you have to put it together, right? I talked about scanning. All of the little bits and things that you're hearing, going back to when you asked me the question about the pandemic, and I was like, no, I didn't say when it was coming, but I knew eventually something was going to happen, and you're going to have to be agile and be ready. And I knew coming up into the weeks to take my things home, because again, you have information, you think, you put it together. Where is this going? And if you can do that, it's like being on the river. Change is like the river. It keeps flowing, and you have to scan, like you said, and learn and just go with it in the moment. But at the same time, know that everything is changing.
Sometimes the river dries up, and sometimes it overflows, right? Those are all changes. It's not a constant thing. It's running smoothly today, and tomorrow there are 20 inches of rain, and then it's gone. It's dry, and you're in literally you have a famine happening because no rain has fallen. Like, this is the world we live in. I was watching I think it was a rerun of the first team that went up for quite a while to the moon, that was going to the moon. And it was one woman, a Black man, and two white gentlemen, but they were all in different aspects. And I'm sitting here going, okay, why aren't we, the individuals, seeing what's coming? because they're looking to put things on the moon so that if something happens to this earth, and we already know with climate change, did you see all the tornadoes that just happened? Did you see all the overflows that are happening and the floods? They're already thinking we need a place to go in case of an emergency, right? And you see that shuttles are being built that goes up into the atmosphere for a day. They're testing this stuff out. It is coming. Why aren't we thinking, about that? You see, Elon Musk is already thinking about it. He's building space shuttles for regular passengers.
Yes, but as you're talking, and I'm like, which way do I go, the river or outer space? Because I could talk about both, because I love, right?
It's all changing.
It's all changing, but I'm going to say something that you said about the river, which is really interesting. The river is going to be the river. And coming from Jamaica, I love the river, know the river. The river is going to do what the river needs to do. To me, the most agile force that needs to be there needs to be you. Because as the river flows and bends and dries up or whatever,
you can't move the river.
What is it?
You can't move the river unless you put a dam or something, but it's going to be there.
It's going to overtake it too, right? But you have to learn, just like the river, and that's a great place to sort of end this, is that how do you continue to flow and bend and expand when you need to and contract when you need to, and maybe even dry up when you need to.
Yeah. And, how do you start preparing yourself? By changing your mindset to be in a place where you start thinking about doing future thinking and just saying, okay, if not for me, it will impact the next generation to come. And how do you want to leave this world? I think about that all the time. How do I want to leave this world when I'm gone? What is the legacy that you want to leave? And if it's something that you're not doing now, then you need to change. I mean, talk about mental change. Even spiritually, you start thinking about, if it's my death, like, where do I go? Am I really going to be here? Like, you start thinking about that as you change in years. The older I get, the more spiritual I think I've become, because I'm thinking about things beyond, right? Beyond me, outside of myself. And so those are changes we have to start thinking about and making. At a certain point in life, you have to stop just thinking about it and do.
And I think the word that brings the thinking and the doing together, which I love, the thinking and the doing, is really intention. Yeah. And so my wish for anyone listening today is to have the intention that you will start to prepare to be change ready by observing yourself and understanding that things are not going to, everything can't be in your control. It's some things are in your control in terms of what you can do in the moment, how you respond to it. And that, I would say, but you have to see it for yourself, change is good. We need that. Imagine if we didn't have that, we'd be really bored. Wouldn't we?
Yes. And I have to end saying, I do a vision board every year. And that vision board helps me to think in advance about what are the things I want to change in my life and how I'm going to go about doing it and in what time frame I'm going to do that. And so at the end of every year, I sit and I contemplate, and I now have my friends. I give a workshop with my friends, and we can check back on it. Like, what is your progress towards this particular goal that you have? It could be buying a house. It could be just saving more money for retirement, doing investments. There are all these different things that we have. And I do say, if you don't have a vision board or you don't write down your goals, that's a way to help manage your change.
And it does have power, because the vision board makes the unconscious conscious. And when the unconscious becomes conscious, you are more, what is the word, apt to see, and the opportunities, you don't miss it because you're intentional, you're looking for it. And by the way, you only find most of the time what you look for. And so I love that, Sandi, how you ended with that. Right. Yes. So
well, I hope we gave a lot of takeaways, and people will go out and start thinking about how they're changing and how to change the world.
Yes. And then just finally, how to reach us. You can always reach me at bold at Audrey D. Lloyd. So that's Audrey like in Audrey Hepburn, and Lloyd's is in London.com. So that's bold at audreydlloyd.com.
And I'm Sandi with an I, Sandi, Sandi Webster, and it's Sandi at sandiwebster.com. It's very simple. You can Google me, LinkedIn to me, and I'll be there.
Wonderful. Well, this was great, Sandi. We'll see everyone again. Bye for now.
Thank you for your primer chat.